Hi, everybody. I'm John Kraska, Executive Director for Every Library and the Every Library Institute. This is my colleague, Megan Blair. She and I have been working for some time on a project called the Cannabis Tax Policy and Libraries White Paper. It's part of the Every Library Institute research series. Today for Library Advocacy and Funding Conference 2022, LAFCON, we wanted to share with you some insights that we have for library leaders at the state level, as well as in municipalities and counties and local level, on ways to potentially leverage new funding for your public libraries within this cannabis and recreational marijuana framework. So thanks for being with us today. We're going to take a little bit of time with you and chat this thing through. Again, my name is John Kraska, Executive Director for Every Library and the Every Library Institute. My colleague Megan.
Hi, I'm Megan. I'm the Policy and Advocacy Strategist at Every Library. Also currently a Master's of Public Administration candidate at New York University. And I am a former employee of the Massachusetts State House.
And Megan, tell everybody why we're talking about cannabis today. I'm not much of a user myself. I enjoy scotch and bourbon more than that, but you come at this from a very unique perspective.
Yeah, when I was an aide at the State House, my boss was the chair of the Cannabis Policy Committee. So I have some insight into a state legalizing cannabis for the first time.
And I'm excited to be able to share this with the library community. So again, this is part of the, and I'm going to minimize our video here now so that people can see the full slides. But again, this is part of our Every Library Institute research series. We have research on public policy, tax policy, education policy across a wide number of topics. From education policy, it's things like the summer slide, the COVID slide, and school libraries. We're looking at issues around literacy and learning and reading, and how they impact determinants of health, economic well-being, of course, educational attainment, and how libraries fit into that mix. And we invite you to download the paper here, the white paper on cannabis tax policy and libraries anytime for free from the everylibraryinstitute.org site. Just go to the tab if you can't find this particular URL at that moment. So Megan, why don't you take us through from that state perspective, state by state, what's happening around recreational cannabis, marijuana. We're gonna go back and forth, folks, on what word we use, I'm sure.
Sure. So first, we're going to take a look at the state of the cannabis landscape. So 18 states have legalized recreational cannabis, with another 19 allowing the sale of medical cannabis. In states that have both recreational and medical, the tax rates for recreational are significantly higher. Tax policies on recreational cannabis are generally more discretionary and allow more leeway for policymakers to determine how tax revenues are allocated. So given this historic approach by states, it is very unlikely that libraries would be identified as beneficiaries of medical cannabis revenues, but state revenue might be somewhere libraries could benefit. Here we have a breakdown of Washington state's revenue since cannabis was first legalized in 2014. Every state, like Washington, every state that has legalized cannabis has seen an increase in revenue each year. So this is a rapidly expanding market that states that have recreational cannabis are seeing huge surpluses in revenue.
It's interesting across these states, the surplus of revenue, the increases in revenue, policymakers are trying to figure out what to do with it properly.
Exactly.
Across these 18 states with recreational cannabis sales, there are two different types of taxes that happen at the state level that we want to take you through for a moment in terms of a little bit of fiscal policy literacy here. There's excise taxes and sales taxes, and they're put on the product differently. Each state and each city across the country also has that is in those 18 states has a different approach to putting their tax policy to work. In some places, it's very heavy on sales tax. In some places, it's very heavy on excise taxes. In other places, they also breed in what is called local options taxes, which we'll talk about in a few moments. But in all these situations, The policy framework that we're looking to analyze for libraries, how do we put ourselves into this system, is where do we fit in this stacked tax scheme? The application of sale of taxes here is either on products or on sales. Excise tax. You've heard perhaps the term sin tax. A sin tax is used around alcohol, gambling, tobacco, and in these certain states now where there's recreational marijuana, recreational cannabis, we're seeing these excise taxes, these sin taxes levied as well on cannabis. Again, this is a state level tax, not a local. It's not the city of Chicago. It's not the city of Boston. It's the state of Illinois. It's the state of Massachusetts potentially. Sin taxes, these excise taxes, are taxed on the price of the product, kind of like sales taxes, but usually at a higher rate. They're taxed on weight. So cigarettes are like that. You've got your 20 Class A's in a pack. Alcohol is taxed like that, depending in a certain respect on proof, like the number 3 way that excise taxes are done as well. So a higher alcohol content gets taxed at a different rate. Same thing with a higher level of the THC within cannabis that's taxed at those higher excise rates. Sales tax is sales tax. It happens at the register. It costs you $10. It's a 6% sales tax they tack it on. But again, these stacked tax rates are important to understand because when you're looking to write policy about where libraries should be fitting into this in terms of either funding from the state to, say, state aid or funding from the state for programs or grants, where is it coming from? And what the type of tax is matters a great deal. The opportunity to understand that is what we're going to lay out here in the white paper. We've got a full dossier of the other 15 states out of the 18. But you'll see here that many of the states, well, Alaska, forgive me, is all excise. Nevada is a little bit of a mix. Illinois certainly has a passel of things that they're doing. And again, that stacked approach for state, the type of state, and then the local options as well. The other component of the state policy that's very important to understand, and the white paper discusses it in some more detail, is that right now in every single one of the 18 states that has recreational cannabis with either a excise or sales tax approach or both, the state has already allocated where the revenue is going to go from recreational cannabis. They've already done it because, no offense to the library community, we've been late to the game. The opportunity here in the existing 18 states is to, in some way, shape, or form, in the future, insert ourselves into this mixture. In the states where it has not been enacted yet, there's opportunities from the beginning. And as we get through this, we're going to talk a little bit more about that, about how to do it. There's opportunities from the beginning to get yourself into this tax scheme. But you'll see on here that the programs in many ways around recreational cannabis are intended to support drug enforcement, drug education, but they're also intended to focus, because sin taxes tend to do this, on public health, on education, Montana has substance abuse prevention, wildlife and state parks. Now, that's interesting. Veterans, cool, and the general fund. And that's the other component of this, folks, is how does this impact the general fund for your states? California is looking at equity programs. And can you fit a library into an equity program? Yes, I think you can as a grant application, but could we be naming ourselves the same way that child care services or environmental programs are? And I'm not calling out California. There's 17 other states that we have been behind the ball on this. And shaping the library position in relation to what's currently there, we have to understand that there's a number of different groups. In Arizona, community colleges get a piece of this. Municipal police and fire districts get a piece of this. The Highway Fund, the Justice Reinvestment Fund, and the Attorney General's office, of course, gets a piece of it already. How do we move ourselves into that mixture that's already in existence? Or better yet, in the states that are not currently doing recreational, how do we get there from the beginning? It's at the state's discretion. All of these schemes are set by either the legislature or theoretically the voters. Though in the states that have already done it, it's been really the legislature itself. some states are very prescribed in their statutes where revenue is going. Other states are less so. Many states have left the responsibility around reallocations, those 18, up to the legislature to do from time to time. And in the white paper, we talk about how to, again, insert yourself into that process for reallocation. Because if it's not going to good uses right now, if it's not good money going to good ideas, how do we have that conversation with the state legislature? And some of the states currently with less prescriptive language could provide pathways or could libraries could find pathways to do it. Megan, I forget, did we want to talk a little bit about Massachusetts and how they went back and forth on it between the ballot measure and the state legislature?
Yeah, sure. The state legislature was slow to act on legalization. So it ended up becoming a ballot measure and it passed. And then the state decided to go and change what people had just voted on. So they actually changed the tax rate. And I should also mention during that process, when the state legislature was rewriting the law, basically like every interest group in the state was up there at the state house meeting with elected officials and trying to get their cause represented and get money allocated towards their cause. And like you said, John, libraries have been slow to act and slow to get involved in this process.
Well, you just said something that I'm not trying to harp on our library colleagues here, but you just said every special interest group was up at the State House in Massachusetts, except for our dear friends in the libraries, right?
Right, exactly.
Yeah. I appreciate you sharing that real life example here. All right, can you take us a little bit through, Megan, what local options? I just, the state conversation is cool, but can you go through local?
Yeah, so local options, option taxes are another opportunity for libraries to get involved. So local tax options have been enacted in many states, with most municipalities with cannabis retail locations opting to impose these taxes. Not a lot of information is available yet on exactly how cities and towns are spending cannabis tax revenue, but we can assume that most money is going into general funds, which is spent on city departments and schools. So here we have a breakdown of uses of local option taxes by municipalities. They go to things like health programs, public safety, economic development, neighborhood improvements, social impact projects, and rainy day reserves. There's different ways that municipalities set local option taxes. And we believe that public libraries should be eligible as beneficiaries of a local option tax. So in some jurisdictions, the tax rate and uses are set by the municipal council, but in other communities, local option taxes are set by the voters through ballot measures. And we have two examples here in Colorado. In 2019, residents of Craig, Colorado passed ballot measure 2A to help fund the Moffat County Library and Museum with marijuana tax revenue. So this is a perfect example of how libraries can get involved and how libraries have directly benefited from cannabis tax revenue. And then in Colorado, there have been several ballot measures over the years to increase local taxes to support community programs. So we think that, this is just going to keep happening in communities all over the country. There's going to be a lot of ballot initiatives, and libraries should really be there in the conversation to try to get some of this tax revenue.
It's interesting that it's from Colorado that we're seeing this, because Colorado, of course, was the first state to legalize recreational. So they've had more time to be sort of the laboratory of democracy. But as Megan was saying, to learn from that and to be able to insert ourselves into that ballot measure process. Likewise, that second bullet point about tax rates and uses being set by the municipal council. It's not just the tax rate, it's the uses. So if your city council is the one who's responsible for it, your town board, your county commission, your county supervisors, the dialogue that has to happen there is classic lobbying activity. But the local uses for local good as a rule around local option sales taxes is really important to consider. All right, Megan, that was some wonky stuff about
Mhm.
policy, and I appreciate it very much. And I think folks need to hear about that. Can we talk a little bit, you and me, about the opportunities that exist around this, both for the state legislatures as well as from some of that local option work? So, messaging. Megan, you've been on the receiving end of the messaging from
Yeah.
people in Massachusetts. I mean, what works?
I mean, I think you really need to meet with elected officials, meet with their staff, and show them just how much you care and just how much your organization, your library needs this money and exactly like what it's going to go to and how much it could help.
You talk about the Alaska After School Network and the Colorado Early Literacy Grants as examples here.
Yeah, so these are two programs that are already benefiting from cannabis tax revenue in Alaska and Colorado. So these are two programs that were set up by the state to directly help children in their communities.
It's an interesting model there. When we look at the local option side of things, each and every state, each and every municipality has some version of their own tax uh, benefit scheme here, and that one key thing to do here in this mix is to have your state library association. I'm not suggesting the state library itself, but the state library association look at a policy position around local options. While it's the state organization that's talking about local taxes, that relieves some of the burden on individual libraries, and it allows an individual library to say, "Well, our state organization thinks that this is how libraries could be pre-positioned for funding opportunities based on, as Megan was saying, the mission of the organization." It's important also for library leaders, whether you're through the State Library Association or individual actors as who might be looking to bring your colleagues along in the State Library Association, to be more directly involved in this industry, um, because the library themselves are, if you are seen, as Megan was saying before, if you're seen as enacting some components of the mission that is being funded elsewhere, particularly around substance abuse or cannabis education or early childhood, the other key option or the key situation here is that we have to make an ask. We cannot simply tell a story. The ask versus storytelling in library advocacy is a dramatic shortfall that we have as a sector. We tend to tell a lot of stories, but what's the particular ask for your either local option in this case or state scheme? I mean, something as prosaic as saying we need 10 to 20% of revenue to be dedicated specifically for library activities. And if that's summer learning, what does that do? What does job training do? What does recidivism supports do? And another policy framework piece here for any library individually looking to advocate for this, or the State Library Association to create a framework, and we endorse this here at the Everett Library Institute, is that cannabis revenue should augment or supplement, not supplant, existing funding sources. You're not looking to bump your regular budget out of the way. You're looking to bring in new money to create new programs or new money to scale up, expand existing programs as well. The cannabis ecosystem is something that we need to get involved with, folks. As library leaders, whether it's the State Library Association or individual actors or folks looking to sort of explore this out in front, the state library associations need to pay attention to, as a coalition member, folks who care not just about the expansion, but the tax scheme that is supported by the expansion of it. A couple here on the screen are real key players with multi-state impactors going on. In the white paper, we discuss it at further length, certain groups that you should be involved with in order to either change the allocations in existing states through coalition, through discussion, through dialogue. So it's not competitive, it's not a zero-sum game. And as other states are writing policies now, All right, Megan, you want to take us through the overall recs here?
Sure. So this industry is really new. So states are likely to be amending where their revenue is going, along with municipalities. We mentioned before that different cities are voting for different tax rates and changing where money is going to. So libraries really need to take advantage now of the newness of the industry to push to receive this revenue. And in states that have not yet legalized, but where legislation has already been filed or is currently being written, library advocates should meet with legislatures to discuss funding. So yeah, this industry is just going to continue to expand.
Well, where things are going right now in September of 2022 is anybody's guess.
Mhm.
I read the news, I listen to the radio. You know, what's going to happen next is volatile, but there are a number of states in 2022 who have been considering going for a recreational cannabis measure. There are some states that are closer than others. And it's critically important for libraries to be involved in this policy conversation, this funding conversation now, especially if it does become legalized at the federal level. Each of the states, the same thing. I mean, it could be alcohol, it could be tobacco, it could be any of those, anything. States regulate their own tax schemes. So if we are not at the table, we are not going to be able to benefit from something that's going to be one of the single largest, newest sources of tax revenue to hit since they instituted the income tax back in 1917. The diversity of the stakeholders that we need to talk to go far beyond the usual library champions here. Um, while we may have some folks who are interested hobbyists, we need to have this policy conversation at a high level with the other stakeholders who are in that sales to benefit from sales tax, to be beneficiaries of those sin taxes, and to set local option policies in a way that builds the local community with this newfound revenue. All right, it's a short one because we have a long paper. Megan, I'm bringing us back on screen here. We have a long white paper. It was a pleasure to work with Megan to develop it. Her on-the-ground experience in Massachusetts and her other policy work since has really, I think, created a good tool for library leaders to understand what's happening here. The opportunities to grow revenue out of this, folks, is something that we're very encouraging of. And I also want to volunteer that every library and the Every Library Institute are here to help support you in this conversation as well. So we would like to help you think it through. And if you're lucky, you get to talk to Megan and not me. Any closing thoughts, Megan?
Yeah, I guess just we realize that this is such a huge opportunity for libraries, and we've fallen a little bit behind so far, but it's still really early in the industry. So now's the time to get involved.
Great. Thank you very much, Megan, for this collaboration today. And everyone, enjoy the
Thank
rest
you.
of the Library Advocacy and Funding Conference, LAFCON 2022. Be well. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thanks.